encourage and equip worship leaders and other church musicians. Our plan is to impart life-changing knowledge that will increase your ability to minister in your local church. We trust that this video presentation will help accomplish this. We pray a blessing on you, your anointing, and your abilities, that the Lord would bear the utmost fruit from your life, in Jesus' name.
Hi, I'm Tom Brooks, and I'd like to welcome you to Volume 4 of Contemporary Keyboard Styles. I'm the producer and arranger for Integrity's Hosanna Music, and I'd like to use this opportunity to share with you some of the things I've learned about worship and leading people into God's presence. Really pray that this videotape is going to be helpful to you. This is really a continuation of Volume 3. We talked about a lot of different subjects in Volume 3, and we're going to pick up where we left off. I'm going to go through a quick overview of the things I touched on in Volume 3, and then we're going to pick up for this volume. First of all, I'd like to go back and just reiterate what we said at the very beginning about our purpose. The reason why we're doing all this is to help bring people into God's presence through praise and worship music. That really concisely states our goal. And really everything we do, whether it's choosing a chord or a rhythm, or talking about arranging, whatever that is, we need to ask ourselves, is what we're doing, is it helping to bring people into God's presence? And if so, then we're on the right track. We talked about how we need to inspire people and yet not draw attention to the music. You know, if you have a flamboyant progression that could be great to impress your musical friends, but it might distract people from God's presence rather than draw them in. So we definitely want to be worship and not entertainment. There's a big difference, and what we're going to be talking about here is worship, of course. We talked about 3 points that we were going to hone in on. We need to be encouraging people to sing the Word of God, which means everything we do needs to support them and help them to sing the songs. We need to inspire them to enter His presence. That's the whole reason why we're using substitution chords and things like that, to help inspire them, just to enrich the harmony and embellish it a little bit. And the 3rd point is to allow them to forget their surroundings. You know, if they came to the service with problems, challenges in their life, we want to create a musical atmosphere, just like David did back in the Old Testament, to help them forget about their problems and focus in on the Lord. So really, those 3 goals. We divided the video into 3 aspects. Harmony is the first one, rhythm is the second one, and the third one we're going to touch on will be arranging, which is going to really integrate both those concepts and talk a little bit about your interface with the worship band, etc. And we're going to talk a little bit about free worship. Another point I made is, don't let the terminology throw you off. A lot of times people get, you know, you lose them when you give them a musical term they don't understand. The thing that excited me when I first went to college, I'd been playing music professionally for a while. When I went to college and first started taking theory, what I found is that all of the theoretical names for things were concepts that I already knew in my own mind from having an experience with music, and I was just finding the official name for some of these things I already knew. So really, there's still only 12 tones in an octave. There's nothing mysterious in there that you need to be afraid of. There's a lot of terminology that sounds pretty unusual to you maybe, but I'll make a point to explain that real clearly and give you an easy to remember term that you can hang your hat on. Okay, the first area we're going to go to is harmony. And we touched on, in the first video, we touched on chord substitution. We talked about adding non-chord tones. We touched a little bit on inversion, suspensions. I'll give you the complete list. There's really 10 aspects. Chord substitution, adding non-chord tones, inversions, that's when the bass note is different from the root of the chord, suspensions, typical 4/3 suspension, cadences. We talked about modulations a little bit. These are the ones we're going to go into in depth now. Polychords, pedal tone bass, and then some different voicings. So what I'm going to do is take some musical examples, and we're going to focus on the last 5. We really focused on the first 5 in video Volume 3. So, you know, if you're missing any of those, you might go back and refer to that. We're going to use the song Holy Ground as our example piece for today. What I'll do first is play through it once, give you an idea how it sounds, and then we'll go back through and we'll analyze why it sounds like it does. We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. Okay? It's a pretty simple version of the song. Now what I'm going to do is walk through it and stop every time we get to suspension and inversion, chord substitution, that sort of thing. The first chord, let's stop right there. The first chord is, some people would call this A flat over B flat. Now just to get you oriented, we're in the key of E flat now. E flat major, so it has 3 flats. The first chord is A flat triad over B flat. The risk of sounding too elementary, when you have a slash like that in between a chord, the symbol on the top refers to the triad on the top musically, meaning in your right hand if you're playing piano. Below the slash is the bass note. It's not a chord down there, it's just a single note. So on top of the slash is the chord, below the slash is the bass note. Sometimes in music too, you'll see it where it doesn't really look like top and bottom, it looks like side to side. If it's side to side with a slash, then usually the chord on the left is the right hand, and the one on the right is the bass note. Now, the official name for this chord is actually B flat 11. I would say, in my notes I made here, I signified things that are on the top 10 list. If you don't get anything else out of this video, you got to remember these top 10 things. This is top 10 list number 1. I would say this chord, really, you don't hear much of this chord used until like maybe 25 years ago or so. It started to become real popular and really now has replaced the 5/7 chord, I mean, to a great extent in pop music today. The typical way would be if you're in the key of E flat to start on here. We are standing, instead of here. This is the 5/11 chord. Now, just to give you a brief origin here, if you build that chord, it's a B flat chord. Let's build it from down here. You've got B flat as the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th. Right? Are you with me so far? Let's walk back. The root, the 3rd, the 5th, is your basic B flat triad. The 7th, the 9th, and the 11th. Okay? Now if you look, you can see why it's called A flat over B flat, because if you drop the 3rd out, go and drop the 5th out too, that's exactly what you have. An A flat triad over B flat in the bass. Now, there's a rule that you just need to kind of tuck in your memory and know. Whenever you have an 11th chord, you've got a clash between the 11th and the 3rd. You've got that augmented octave there, which, you know, if you put it in the same octave, it's basically a half-step clash. So the rule is, whenever you have an 11th in a chord, you omit the 3rd, drop out the 3rd of the chord. So what you end up with is this. Now the fact that the F is there, it doesn't really change the function of the chord. So some people would call it A flat over B flat. Some people would call it F minor 7 over B flat. But really, for me, it functions about the same way. So really, A flat over B flat is the same as B flat 11. As you can see, it's just an upper tonality chord of B flat. An upper tonality chord would be anything that has the 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th in it. Now that chord is going to come up a lot, so I'll try to refer to it both ways. If you're not familiar with the term 5/11, or just an 11th chord, if you're not familiar with that, I'll try to explain it in its its other name, which in this case would be A flat over B flat. Okay, first measure. Now just to continue on that, the reason why that's in there, look at the melody note. The melody note is on E flat. If you're playing a 5/7 chord, you're going to smash right against the melody. See? Here's your B flat 7 chord. You got the melody right there. So that's why, in this case, the 11th is a much better choice than just a regular 5 chord. Here we go. We are... Okay, let's stop right there. This song is interesting because the bass, there are a lot of inversion chords in this song, meaning songs where the bass isn't on the root of the chord. And here's a case right now. This is the way I like to voice that chord on standing. We are standing. Let's analyze what that is. Really, it's F in the bass, A flat. There's no C, and you've got E flat and B flat. So here are the members isolated in one octave there. What that is for me is an F minor 7 chord with that added fourth in there. So it's one of those, we talked about non-chord tones. It's just a minor chord with that fourth added to it. Now, the reason the fourth is added is because it's in the melody. You're standing. What's going to happen is the E flat is going to resolve to D. So it's a suspension in a way too. Another way of looking at this chord, look at it as being a B flat chord. If B flat is the root, here are the members you've got. So it's a B flat 7 chord with a suspension in it. And that suspension resolves there, and you just got a regular B flat 7 chord. Just so happens it has F in the bass. That's a complicated example of a pretty simple sounding thing. The main point to get out of it is stand. Suspension resolves right there. Go to the next chord. Here's E flat over G in the bass. So it's an E flat chord with a third in the bass. It's a 1 chord with an added second. Now what I do is I resolve that to 1 immediately. So really it's functioning more like a suspension. It's a 2-1 suspension. You see why that is? You've got an E flat triad. You take the third out of here and you put it in the bass, and you add the second. I would say next to that 5/11 chord, this is the next thing that goes on your top 10 list. And this particular voicing is the one that I use a lot. Because the third's in the bass, I leave the third out of the right hand and move the second down to 1. So if you look at those two chords together, you've got a nice counter melody line walking through there. You're it's kind of walking through those suspensions there. It's a nice counter melody line. It's probably a good alto line for your group. Going ahead, on holy ground. Here we have the 1 chord, E flat, with B flat in the bass. So it's an inversion. This is actually a second inversion chord. It means that the 5th is in the bass. Ground. Moving ahead from there, 5 chord with the 7th in the bass. B flat chord with the 7th in the bass. Here's the 1 chord with a 3rd in the bass. I'm going through this pretty quick because we talked about a lot of these substitutions in Volume 3. Next phrase, there's our 5/11 chord again, A flat over B flat. Here we get to an interesting chord. This has a couple of different names. The name I prefer for this is G half diminished. Other terms, let me put it in 1 octave for you. Other people would call this G minor 7 flat 5, is another name you hear often. Let's look at the members. It's basically a G diminished chord, minor 3rd, diminished 5th, so it's G diminished with an F on top. Now if it was G full diminished, it would be this. It would have a diminished 7th. This is G full diminished seventh. That's the proper name for it. That's why we call this half diminished, because it's got a diminished triad but a minor seventh. Another name for it, the correct theoretical name, is diminished minor seventh chord. Diminished triad minor seventh. That's why the simpler way, we always, like jazz books would call it a half diminished chord, because it's really only half diminished. The triad's diminished, the seventh is minor. Another way of looking at it would be B flat minor sixth. Take the G and put it up here. B flat minor with an added sixth. See how it functions the same? And as long as your bass player's on the G, you get the same effect. A guitar player might not know what G diminished is, half diminished is, but he might know what a minor sixth is. So it's good to know that, so if you're trying to communicate with a guitar player who might know different voicings, it's another way of saying that same chord. Know that there are angels. Now we come to the C flat 9 chord. Let's voice this out in one octave. C, the third, the fifth, seventh, and the flatted ninth. The regular ninth would be D, the flatted ninth is D flat. Now we talked about this chord in volume 3 in the song I Will Come and Bow Down. Rather than give you the full-blown version of how this gets to where it is, you can check back on that one. But it's C with a flatted ninth. And oftentimes when you get, again, this is another upper tonality chord, usually you don't have the bass note up high in the chord because there's enough members up there. You just have the C in the bass and the third, fifth, seventh, and ninth up in the right hand. Angels. Bass walks down through B flat. All around. Here you have an F major chord, so it's a 2 chord with a third in the bass. All around. A flat minor 6, another interesting chord. In this key, in the key of E flat, A flat would be the 4 chord. It would typically be major. Here it's minor. It's got a 6th. Going on from there. Let us praise. 1 with the 3rd in the bass. Same move as before. Suspension. Jesus now. Same as before. We are standing in His presence. 1 chord with 5 in the bass. On holy ground. 4/3 suspension at the end. Okay? Now, let me mention one more thing, and then I'll go through the whole song one more time. A way that we typically use to, as a coda for this, is to turn around the last line 3 times. We are standing in your presence. We are standing. Go to that G half diminished chord again. Ding in your presence. C flat 9. A flat minor 6 with the C flat in the bass. Standing in your presence. And we do the whole last line over B flat with a pedal point B flat in the bass. Holy ground. Okay, let me start from the top and we'll go through the whole works. We are last line 3 times. In His presence, we are. settled B flat in the bass. Suspension. And resolve it. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about adding non-chord tones. We've talked about a number of inversions in this particular song, a number of suspensions in this particular song. Just to touch on modulations, if I was going to modulate this song, the chord I like to use to modulate, typically the main rule for modulation is you take the 5 chord of the key you want to go to. So we're in E flat here. Holy ground. So typically you'd go to, say you want to go up a half step. You want to go to E major, so you take the 5 of that, which is B. For me, I would always prefer to substitute the 5-11 chord where you would always use the 5-7. Instead of that 5-7, I would prefer the 5-11, which in this case is A over B. So we finish off, holy ground. So you can see how that would modulate. Okay, let's look on to the next song. I'm going to go through these songs pretty quickly, and I'd like to get to some other topics in terms of arranging of things, so that's Holy Ground. The next song up we're going to feature is called Crown with Mercy. Another title for it is Bless the Lord. Seems like we've got about at least 135 songs titled Bless the Lord, so everybody's trying to come up with alternative titles. This is written by Bill McKenzie, a good friend of ours from Illinois. I'll play through it once so you can get a look at it, and then we'll go back and analyze it a little bit. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me, bless His holy name. One more time, I'll try to sing it for you. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me, bless His holy name. Forget not all His benefits, for He's forgiven you and sent His word to heal you. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul, within me, bless His holy name. Remember all His love for you, for He's redeemed your life from death and crowned you with mercy. Okay, we've got a number of interesting things here. We start off on that same 5-11 chord. Now we're in the key of G, just to get yourself oriented. F sharp is in the signature. This starts off on the 5-11 chord, which is a C over D. C triad, D in the bass. Bless the Lord. Starts off with a suspension right there in the melody. 4-3 over the G. Now usually, when I play that, I also add a 2-1 suspension. So you've got a parallel suspension. You've got, if you can see, it's a G chord, but I've got a 2 and a 4 in it. And the 2 resolves to 1, and the 4 resolves to 3. That's the sound there. And then I go to the move we talked about in Volume 3, which is Omardian's kind of signature move, the D over G. It's hard to listen to pop radio for 5 minutes these days and not hear that move somewhere. Zillions of songs use that. I use that on the word soul. Oh, my soul. Back to the 5-11 chord. All that is within me. That's an interesting chord right there. That's a D sharp full diminished 7 chord. We talked about before half diminished. Here's a full diminished. Full diminished means, let's go to D sharp and build it there in 1 octave. Diminished triad with diminished 7th. Again, we talked about that a little bit in volume 3. So I won't belabor the point here. That's a chord that pulls you into E minor. Major 7th on the 4 chord with the 9th in it. Spell that out for a minute. C major. Add the major 7th. Also add the 9th. That's what you've got. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Voice with the melody on top. It looks like this. Going on from there. Forget not all his benefits, for he's... This is G major 7 with the 9th in it. Let's build that. G, the 3rd, the 5th, major 7th, and the 9th. He's forgiven you and sent. Here's an interesting move. You're on the minor, E minor. All you're doing is walking down minor with the major 7th, minor with the minor 7th, minor with the 6th. Just walking down by half tones there, underneath the 3rd in the melody. Sent his word. That chromatic motion there is made to order counter melody line for some instrument. To heal. Let's look at this chord. Here's a good one. A minor 9. Build it in 1 octave here. It's A, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th. See how that gets there? Heal. I'm even including the 11th down there, which I would usually do. That's the D. Heal. C6. Back to your 5/11 chord, or C over D. Then the second half is just about the same. Bless the Lord. Suspension. See how that works? 5/11. D sharp full diminished. Redeemed your life from death. Same move again. And crowned you with mercy. Let's go through it one more time. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Before I go through it again, let me reiterate a point I made in the first video, volume 3, about using the left hand for rhythm. Watch how I do that again. Using the bass note for like the kick drum and the top note of the left hand for the snare drum. Technique to make the thing drive ahead, and it's doing really the same function that a drum kit would do. Here we go. Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Benefits, for he's forgiven you and sent his word to heal the Lord, oh my soul. He's redeemed your life from death and crowned you with mercy. Okay? I'd like to veer away a little bit from what we've been talking about here and move into a little bit different zone. We've been talking about harmony. We touched a little bit on rhythm. I want to go to an area that I've called arranging. Now, in saying that, I'm not talking about arranging in the pure sense of the word, where you'd be, writing for strings and brass, etc. I'm talking more about just how to integrate just the simple elements we've talked about, primarily just the bass player, different voicings on the piano, things like that. Just on voicings for a minute, before we get knee-deep into the arranging thing, let me just show you real quickly some things you can do with voicings to enhance even real simple chord progressions. Let's go back to the key of C. If I'm going to play a C chord, just to sit down, if somebody says, play me a C chord, probably what I would do is this, which for me is a better approach than this. What it does is it adds a second to the C chord, so you've got that. Add the second, that's the D. Now, whenever I do that, I usually leave out the third because it just gives you a little bit more poignancy. People are so used to hearing chords built in thirds. Anything you can do in your voicing to get away from building it in thirds, for me it's a plus anyway. It just gives you a little bit more distinct sound. So I leave out the third up there. And I'm fortunate enough, God gave me a big enough hand to play triads in this way with the left hand, where you can catch the third with one. If you can't grab all of that, you can roll it and achieve the same effect, really. Like that, and just have the pedal sustain the C. Take a good look at that, because this is a voicing that I use a lot. Even if you can't reach that, roll it. Like that. Part of what makes that sound so good, this is a sort of Aaron Copland, the classical composer, was a big fan of this chord. And his music had a lot of Americana type feel. Billy the Kid and Rodeo and Appalachian Spring, some of the things he's done. For one thing, it gets away from triads in the right hand. You've got fourth and fourth, a little bit starker sound and a little bit fresher sound. You've got the third in the bass, so it's complete. Another favorite voicing, so that's favorite voicing number one. This is all top 10 stuff here. The next voicing will be that same chord but with a third in the bass. C chord with the added second. You still got the fourths to give you some bite. Third in the bass. Okay? Another place you could use this voicing is, let's stay in the key of C for a while. Say you're on an F chord. You can do the same voicing number one, which is like this. See that? How that works? Now do voicing number two on that F chord, where you got the third in the bass. That's a nice voicing. That's another favorite of Copland's. A third voicing, this is an interesting one, would be, this is kind of a cousin to that Michael Omartian type move we talked about before. In Bless the Lord, oh my soul, is to just keep the D triad. Let's go back to C, so we're thinking the same key. We're in the key of C, and really what it is, it's a major 9 chord without the third. So omit the third, and you can see why this chord goes by another name. Lots of times people would call this G over C, because it looks like a G triad over C bass. Again, that's a pretty familiar sound in pop music today. Some other ways to real pretty voicings for that would be to play on the half step between the C and the B. You would think normally you'd want to avoid that, but that half step clash. But in this kind of voicing, it can be real beautiful. See how that works? Well, I've got the 9th and the root and the 7th all real close there. Gives you a nice cluster sound. That's particularly nice with the third in the bass too, or even without the 9th. Pretty voicing. Here's the same thing on F now. It's an F major 9. Omit the third. So really what you've got is a C triad over F bass. Anyway, I just want to show you some of those voicings. Another one, while we're on the subject, let's go to 5/11 chords. We're still in the key of C, so the 5 is G. Build the 5/11 chord. Omit the third, as you know. Now, you know how to do. So you've got F triad over G bass. Usually when I play that, I leave the D in, so you've got a pretty serious cluster. You've got a major second there and a major second there. Another good voicing would be this one. For me, I like the cluster sound. It enriches the harmony a lot for me. Here's another good voicing for the C triad. Again, with no third in the upper part, so you've got the fourths. Gives you a nice rich sound. I'm going to talk some more about voicings when we get going in there, but let's move on to arranging. Some of the basic things I want to talk about in terms of arranging would be, for instance, basic principle number one. And this is assuming now that you're playing in a worship band where you've got a drummer and a bass player, which most of you probably are. One rule is the kick drum and the bass drum always need to be in sync together. Typically, songs like, let's take the song Shout Joyfully, which is one that I wrote. This is a pretty much up-tempo, aggressive song. There's a kick pattern that the drummer automatically has in mind when he hears this. Let me just play a little bit of it for you. Shout, shout joyfully unto God all the earth. Shout, shout joyfully unto God all the earth. Sing the glory of His name and make His praises glorious. Shout, shout joyfully unto God all the earth. Joyfully, joyfully, all the earth shall worship Thee. Joyfully, joyfully, we will sing our praise to Thee, singing praises to Thy name. Starts over. Okay, so you got a basic kind of drum beat there. Again, you can look at my left hand and pretty much see what the drum beat would be. Okay? The bass player should be doubling precisely what that kick pattern is. In this case, it's... If you get the bass and the kick together, you're going to have a tight band. The next cardinal rule would be the bass, talking about the electric bass now, electric guitar player, needs to be in sync with the left hand of the piano. In other words, take Shout Joyfully, for instance. Starts on an A chord. Shout. There's the first inversion chord there. We're in the key of A. C sharp in the bass. So the bass player needs to move there. If he doesn't move there, say he stays here on the A, and you move to C sharp, you see what happens there? What you end up with is a real muddy sound in the bass. I would say, throw a figure up in the air, say 60% of the muddiness or unclarity that comes out of most worship bands is because the bass player and the left hand of the piano aren't coordinated. And the bass player might be walking around through chord changes, and if the piano player, or this could also be for like if there's an organ player playing pedals, or anything like trombone playing low in that register, really any instrument below about here, I would say the G below middle C is the point where below that point you really need to have one tone. Maybe let's go down to here. Say below here. There isn't a whole lot of room for more than one distinct root below that point, which means the bass player, left hand of the piano, organ, any instrument like trombone, tuba, low strings, cello or bass, all need to be on that same note. Otherwise you end up with mud. That sort of sound, particularly banging around a room, it's really going to cause unclarity. So the two rules are kick and bass need to have the same rhythmic pattern, and bass and the left hand of the piano need to be coordinated in terms of the way they're going to move. Second area of arranging, I wanted to talk real briefly on some accompaniment figures. Okay, you're the keyboard player, and say the band, you know, it's a midweek service and there's not a whole lot of band there with you. What are you going to do to fill out the songs? And I'll just offer a couple of suggestions. The first thing, and again I made a point of this in the Volume 3, whatever you say, musically speaking, you need to say it very clearly. Oftentimes, one of the problems is people, they might have a lot of great licks, but they're not defining anything clearly in terms of a part that you can follow. To me, the best part to play is a part you can define in words. Like, for instance, I'm going to play quarter notes in Holy Ground. And that's all I'm going to do. The kind of parts that get unclear is when you say, well, you play quarter notes for a bar, and then you kind of arpeggiate for a couple of bars, and then you just hit whole notes, and then if it's so jumbled that it's not really doing anything definable, you run into two problems. First of all, your music all sounds the same. If I play quarter notes for verse 1, and then it modulates for verse 2, and then I start using broken chord things, all of a sudden then it's like an arranging event, you know, because the part changed, it grew. If all the time, if you're just kind of incorporating everything, then it's kind of like having stew every night of your life rather than, you know, having beef the first night and then, you know, soup the second night. You follow what I'm saying. So the first thing is, whatever you're going to say musically, say it clearly. Define what it is. Use definable parts and change your pattern at real definable points. Like say if you're going to use quarter notes in Holy Ground, then you modulate. Well, at the modulation, when you start chorus 2, that's a very good place to change your pattern. So change patterns at real definable points. In other words, change at the downbeat of the verse, or change halfway through the chorus, or something like that. Let me give you a couple of ideas. I mean, those two basic ones are pretty simple. Quarter notes, which I just played. You could say, but gosh, that's so simple. The point is, if you listen to a lot of pop music, simple is not necessarily, I mean, more often, simple is better. The simpler you can say something, any good speaker or preacher will tell you that. If you can say something in fewer words, chances are you're saying it better. I'll say the same thing is true musically. If you can define a part and make it work with fewer musical elements, it's going to be stronger. Quarter note is not too simple. There's plenty of incredible songs that have been based on nothing but piano quarter notes. Okay, say we've done that for the first verse. We're tired of quarter notes, so now we're going to go to arpeggiated 16ths. Here's another idea. All I'm doing is taking a chord and I'm breaking it apart and doing individual notes of the chord together. Let's do that real slow. To the same progression of Holy Ground. Speed it up. Now those are just some basic ideas. Another song that we touched on earlier was Crowned with Mercies. That pattern, that has kind of a more light, jazzy sort of a feel. So that pattern is obviously going to be different. There are other patterns, but I think the main point is not to catalog all the patterns for you, but just be sure that you're using a pattern that you've thought through. Another good rule of thumb is don't play any note that doesn't have a reason. Somebody said, this is a top 10 saying, somebody said, if notes are silver, then rests are made of gold. What that says to me is that the notes that you don't play are just as important as the notes you do play. So you might think a quarter note part is too simple. Truth of the matter is all those other accessory notes you left out probably made your song better, actually. So don't feel like you got to play a lot of notes to be doing a good job. That's a falsehood. Another thing to think about accompaniment figures is, this leads into my next point, which is counter melody. Think about filling the holes in the melody. This is like the basic arranging 101. Don't be busy when the melody is busy. If the melody's going, standing on holy ground, to me that's the first hole in the melody. It's the place where the vocalists are going to take a breath. Holy ground. So that's the place to put a fill. And go back to your pattern. Angels all around. Next break in the melody. You know, do some kind of broken chord thing. They come back in. You go back to your pattern. The idea of filling the holes in the melody is real important. Moving on into our next category, which is counter melody. That's precisely what counter melody needs to do. It needs to fill the holes. Let's go back to Crowned with Mercies, for instance. Bless the Lord, O my soul, for me, that move there fills the hole after soul. Oh, my soul. Something interesting to shoot through the hole there. All that is within me, bless His holy name. Do something in that hole right there. Forget not all His benefits, for He's redeemed your life. Sent His word to heal you. That octave thing there fills the hole after heal you. The whole idea is, one way to say it is, you talk about your mind's eye. You've heard people talk about that. Well, your mind has an ear too. And your mind's ear is kind of following what's going on. It's following the melody. It's taking into account everything that's going on, but it's following the melody. As soon as the melody takes a breath, then there's room in your mind's ear to be attracted by another figure or a neat, maybe it's an imitation of the melody that just went, something like that. And then when the melody comes back in, you need to get out of the way and let the melody come through clearly. If you're doing fills while the melody's going on, then you're fighting it. So the best job, being a good steward of the time you have, is pop through the holes with a good figure, but then stay out of the way when the melody is, when the people are singing. We're getting close to the end here, so I'm going to go through some of these quickly. Other counter melody techniques would be echo. For instance, if take an example, back to Holy Ground, say, know that there are angels all around, all around. One thing that we usually do is echo the words all around. All these might seem like very simple techniques, but good arranging is really very simple. So echo is a good thing to do. Another technique is imitation, which is similar to echo. Back to here, say, bless the Lord, oh my soul. All that is within me, bless His holy name. Like that might be a form of imitation. You take what the melody did on holy name, and in the hold, you do work your way right back into your pattern. That'd be an example of imitation. Sequence is another thing. That's really about the same thing. A sequence would be where you have a holy name, where you take a figure and you just move it up by whole steps or down by whole steps. Holy name. So you get the idea. At any rate, writing counter melodies is one of the, I'd say that's one of the major things I do to dress up worship songs. Basically, you've got an accompaniment figure that you're playing, something simple, quarter notes, whatever it is, and then every time the vocals take a breath, insert some kind of counter melody thing that you work into it smoothly, work out of it smoothly, and hand it right back to the singers. Okay, another arranging thing I want to talk about would be introductions. Rather than just say you're going to start Shout Joyfully, so what you do is you just strike your A chord and wait for the worship leader to go, it's just a clunky way to start things. And typically, you always do that just because nobody's really thought through how you're going to start it. One good way, and a very simple way, and I'm not referring now to, this is something like we would do on a produced Hosanna album, but then a lot of times we would use something this simple. To take the last line and play it instrumentally. Because everybody, when they hear the last line of a song, they know how to start the song over again. So take that technique and just play the last line of the song. So let's take the last line of Shout Joyfully and just play it instrumentally. Singing praises to. Say if you started like that, then the worship leader knows right where to come in. Shout, shout joyfully. So instrumentally, you just count off with your band. 1, 2, 3. Everybody knows right where to come in. Shout, shout joyfully. And you're off into the song. Another thing to do if you have a song like Holy Ground, another good intro is, now that was using the last line. You can also use the first line of a song as a way to vamp. Maybe if the worship leader's exhorting the people or something like that, you could use the first line of the song. Holy Ground doesn't work too well for that because its progression spins out, but take a song like Crowned with Mercies, say, the other one, and just use the first line. just vamp on that first line. Whenever he's ready, oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul. And you're off into the song. To talk about endings now, or codas, one good thing to do, which works well for worship, is to repeat the last line, like we talked about in Holy Ground. We're standing in your presence. We are standing in your presence. We are standing in your presence on holy ground. If you repeat the last line 3 times, it does a couple things. It allows them to wind down real easily. They can usually pick it up very easily. It's not, you know, if you have a real dressy ending, if it throws them for a lurch, then they stop singing and breaks up the flow. Anytime you want to settle down into a worship progression, repeating that last line too really allows them to meditate on that thought. For instance, that song right there, we're standing in your presence. By the time you repeat that 3 times, you've really got the thought in your mind. On holy ground. You know, you retard as you repeat it, and it really settles you down nicely for heading off into worship. So that's a good technique to use, especially if you're going off into a worship progression. Another note I made is be sure that you pitch your songs in good keys. Typically speaking, in my mind, when I think of the range of the average worshiper, I use about B flat for the bottom. This would be the girls' range now. B flat on the bottom and D on the top. For the guys, of course, it'd be an octave lower. So that means I try to position a song so that it lies real nicely between B flat and D. Now that means if you're going to modulate, you know, maybe you want to start the song so it peaks out around B, then you've got room to modulate it so that it peaks out around D. If you go much higher than D, occasional notes can hit up there, but a lot of people are really going to have to drop off when it gets up that high. And if you go below B flat, again, you're getting pretty low. If it's a worship song, it's okay for it to lean to the low side of the range if it's soft singing. If it's a real rowdy, aggressive song, then there's nothing wrong with having it peak out right around D. Another point about arranging, if you have, say if you know you're going to do a song 4 or 5 or 6 times, my philosophy is I always try to save something so you can have something to add later. If you use all your techniques in the first time through the chorus, then that means you're going to listen to 6 choruses that are basically the same. My technique would be start having, if you know you got 6 times, then have in your mind 6 things that you can add, something that you can add to embellish the arrangement every time you get there. Now it might be something just as simple as having the bass player lay out the first time and bring him in the second time, or it might be a change of accompaniment figure if you start with quarter notes and you add you know, broken chord 16ths later. Just save something so that you've got room for your progression to grow. Another thing I touched on in the other video, but I might touch on again, is in worship progressions, that philosophy holds true too. When I go into a worship progression, I really try to save something so that you know, the worship progression has room to grow. In other words, if you're going to, say you end a song in the key of C, don't jump right into the progression. Go into maybe stay just right there on the C and let that sit and rest for a second. And then begin to develop your progression. Don't jump right into it. Let it grow real naturally. And really this holds true in terms of arranging too. If you have instruments or other things to add, try to save them. Like if you've got brass, don't have the brass come in the first time. Or if you've got background singers, maybe have them sing unison the first time and have them bring in the harmony the second time. So there's a lift every time. And another good technique to do is to modulate. After you've done the chorus 3 times, a modulation will really pick it up. A couple of the points I wanted to make before we stop in terms of practice with your band, and I know a lot of you probably are keyboard players, a lot of you are probably leaders of your worship band. Just think about this. In general, I think, well, most of the people that you're working with are volunteers. That means you're asking them to give up you know, a night of a week to come to a practice. Be sure that you're practicing with a purpose. Don't practice your same mistakes over and over again. You need to analyze what you do. If you play through a song and something just doesn't sound right, you can't go back to the guys and say, guys, something just doesn't sound right. It's your job as leader to analyze and say, you know, The reason it doesn't sound right is because the bass player is not matching the kick pattern, or the bass player is not matching the left hand of the piano on that chord right there. You know, talk specifically. Don't talk in general terms. Producers that drive me crazy are guys that you get finished with a take and they say, well, it was pretty good, but just try it again. What that tells you doesn't give you anything specific to fix. Another way of saying that very same thing is that condemnation is general, but conviction is specific. So if you're going to tell somebody something, don't tell them, well, it generally was kind of so-so. Say specifically, say 95% of it was great, but specifically this one spot needs to be fixed. What that'll do is the guys in your band will walk away from that rehearsal feeling like, I really accomplished a lot. You know, I did give up a night with my family or my kids maybe, but I really feel like I accomplished something. I learned something. I grew as a musician. So practice with a purpose. That means don't practice your mistakes. Go there specifically to solve problems, to learn new songs. Know what you're going to do. You should be able to write down before you go to practice what you're going to accomplish in that practice. And pray with them. You know, get together with you guys. There's a lot that the Holy Spirit can do. You know, we've talked a lot about the technical side of this, but really, without the help of the Holy Spirit, all of this technical information really is not going to do you a bit of good. The Holy Spirit needs to take it and needs to apply it in your church, in your life, and in your own keyboard technique exactly the way that it needs to be used. So I think one of the most important things you could pull out of this video would be just to encourage you to pray and to seek God and to remember what your purpose is, which is to lead people into God's presence through praise and worship music. Hope you've gotten something out of this hour. Hope I've been able to help you. God bless you guys.
This video has been a production of Psalmist Resources. Additional resource products are also available from our ministry. These include instructional videos, various audio cassettes, both music and teaching, instructional and reference books on music and worship, and Psalmist, the Praise and Worship magazine. All of these resources are designed to help better equip you to minister in praise and worship. For more information, contact Psalmist Resources, 9820 East Watson Road, St. Louis, Missouri, 63126, or call area code 314-842-6161.